When I first stepped into the metaverse, I did not expect to stay. At that time, it felt like a distant experiment, an abstract digital frontier filled with avatars, virtual land, and promises that sounded far too ambitious to be real. I entered out of curiosity, not belief. I wanted to observe how people interacted, how value was defined, and whether an economy without physical substance could truly sustain itself. In the beginning, the metaverse economy felt chaotic. Digital assets were everywhere. Virtual clothing, land parcels, art pieces, and tokens whose prices shifted wildly within hours. Value seemed driven more by hype than utility. Yet beneath that surface volatility, something fascinating was taking shape. People were not merely buying pixels. They were buying identity, access, and belonging. I created my first avatar with no clear intention other than exploration. But soon, I noticed how ownership worked differently here. When I bought a digital item, it was not just stored on a server. It was recorded, verifiable, and transferable. This was my first real encounter with blockchain-backed ownership, and it changed the way I thought about digital goods forever. As I spent more time inside these virtual worlds, I began to understand that the metaverse economy was not trying to replace the real one. It was extending it. Freelancers were offering services entirely within virtual spaces, designing environments, hosting events, teaching skills, and managing communities. Time, creativity, and trust had become the new currencies. What surprised me most was how quickly social reputation turned into economic power. Avatars with strong networks gained opportunities faster than those with expensive assets but weak connections. Influence mattered more than capital. Collaboration outperformed competition. This was not the ruthless capitalism I had expected. It was something more fluid, more human. Still, uncertainty lingered. Regulations were unclear. Platforms rose and fell. Entire economies vanished overnight when projects failed. I questioned whether this world was sustainable or simply another speculative cycle. Yet, even as projects collapsed, the people remained. They adapted, rebuilt, and migrated, taking their skills, audiences, and experience with them. By the end of my early journey, I realized I was no longer just observing the metaverse economy. I was participating in it. I had earned, lost, learned, and evolved, and the economy, much like myself, was still in motion, unfinished, unpredictable, and full of unanswered questions. As the metaverse matured, so did its economy, and so did I. What once felt experimental began to develop structure. Platforms introduced clearer governance models, creator incentives improved, and communities started demanding transparency and long-term value instead of short-term hype. The economy was no longer just about speculation. It was about sustainability. I began to notice a shift from ownership to participation. People no longer asked, "What do you own?" but instead, "What do you contribute?" Virtual economies started rewarding presence, engagement, and consistency. Events, education, storytelling, and shared experiences became economic engines. The metaverse was learning that attention alone was fragile, but trust created longevity. One of the most powerful lessons I learned was how borders disappeared. In the metaverse economy, geography became irrelevant. I collaborated with creators from different continents, cultures, and time zones without ever exchanging physical currency. Value flowed through shared goals rather than shared locations. Opportunity became less about where you were born and more about what you could build. However, challenges remained. Inequality still existed, just in new forms. Early adopters held advantages, algorithms shaped visibility, and digital fatigue emerged. The metaverse economy reflected human behavior, both its innovation and its flaws. This realization grounded me. Technology had not changed human nature, it had amplified it. What truly transformed my perspective was seeing how identity evolved. People experimented with multiple roles: educator, artist, investor, community leader, often simultaneously. Economic freedom expanded when individuals stopped defining themselves by a single title. The metaverse rewarded adaptability, not rigidity. Today, when I look back on my journey, I no longer see the metaverse economy as a trend. I see it as a mirror of where society is heading: decentralized, experience-driven, and deeply interconnected. It is not perfect, and it is not complete, but neither are we. My journey through the metaverse's evolving economy taught me that value is no longer confined to physical space or traditional systems. It is shaped by creativity, trust, and shared purpose. And as long as humans continue to seek connection and meaning, this digital economy will keep evolving, just as we do. As my journey continued, the metaverse economy began to feel less like a marketplace and more like a living organism. It adapted constantly, responding to human behavior, technological breakthroughs, and social shifts in real time. I stopped trying to predict it and started learning how to move with it. One of the most defining moments came when I realized that time itself had become a tradable asset. In the metaverse, attention was not just valuable, it was measurable. Participation, presence, and contribution could be tracked, rewarded, and amplified. People who consistently showed up, helped others, and created meaningful experiences gained influence that no single purchase could buy. I watched entire microeconomies form inside niche communities. Small virtual worlds develop their own cultures, rules, and currencies. Some were driven by creativity, others by education, entertainment, or social connection. The most resilient ones were not those with the most funding, but those with the strongest sense of shared purpose. Failure also became a teacher. I invested time in projects that promised innovation but collapsed due to poor leadership or misaligned incentives. At first, these losses felt discouraging, but over time, I noticed something remarkable. Failure in the metaverse was faster, cheaper, and more transparent than in the physical world. Lessons arrived quickly, and recovery was possible without starting over from nothing. The economy also began to blur the line between work and play. Gamified systems rewarded learning. Virtual events generated real income. Storytelling became a profession. People no longer asked whether something was real work if it created value for others. Meaning replaced formality as the defining factor of labor. What challenged me most was internal, not technical. The metaverse forced me to confront my assumptions about success. Traditional hierarchies meant little here. Titles carried less weight than contribution. Visibility could vanish overnight if it was not backed by substance. I learned that consistency mattered more than virality, and trust mattered more than scale. By this stage of my journey, I no longer felt like a visitor. I felt like a participant in an unfolding experiment, one that was reshaping how humans define ownership, value, and collaboration. The economy was still evolving, but so was my mindset. And that shift changed everything. Looking forward, I no longer ask where the metaverse economy is going. Instead, I ask how we will shape it. The future is no longer a destination. It is a series of choices made collectively, moment by moment. What lies ahead is not a single unified economy, but many interconnected ones. Some will thrive, others will fade, and new models will emerge that we cannot yet imagine. Automation will increase efficiency, but human creativity will remain irreplaceable. Artificial intelligence may optimize systems, but meaning will always come from people. I have learned that economic freedom in the metaverse does not come from escaping reality. It comes from redesigning participation. When individuals are empowered to contribute skills, ideas, and values without unnecessary barriers, economies become more resilient. The metaverse offers this possibility, but it also demands responsibility. Ethics will define the next chapter. Questions of ownership, privacy, governance, and inclusion can no longer be postponed. If the metaverse economy simply recreates old inequalities in digital form, it will fail its greatest promise. But if it continues to evolve with intention, it may become one of humanity's most powerful tools for collaboration. Personally, this journey reshaped how I see value in my own life. I no longer measure success solely by accumulation, but by impact. I no longer chase trends blindly, but seek alignment. The metaverse taught me that economies are not built on technology alone. They are built on trust, stories, and shared vision. As I stand at this point in my journey, I understand that the metaverse economy is not something happening outside of us. It is a reflection of our choices, amplified by technology. Every interaction, every creation, every community adds a layer to its evolution. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. The metaverse is not the future because it is digital. It is the future because it is human, unfinished, imperfect, and endlessly capable of becoming something better.